The vast hall of the Galactic Council chamber glittered with 1,000 lights, reflecting off alien metals and crystalline structures that spoke of countless civilizations. Representatives from across the galaxy gathered around the colossal circular table. Their forms varied, some towering with scales that shimmered, others squat with multifaceted eyes that absorbed every detail. The air was thick with anticipation and silent resentment. Alexander Graves, the human ambassador, adjusted his collar and took a deep breath. As the sole representative of Earth's unified government, he had the weight of an entire planet's expectations on his shoulders. Humanity's recent emergence into the galactic stage had been met with a mix of curiosity, fear, and derision. Grand Chancellor Voresthal, whose chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the council lights, called the meeting to order. His voice clicked and thrummed through the translator devices. We gathered to determine the future of this galaxy and the place of humanity within it. Alexander stood, his eyes meeting those of the other representatives. Earth has extended its hand in friendship, offering trade, knowledge, and defense cooperation. He paused, ensuring his words carried the gravity he intended. Yet we find ourselves cornered, pressured to yield our advancements without reciprocation. A ripple of unease spread through the chamber. The Trellin Imperium's delegate, a tall, serpentine figure named Zaltorn, hissed softly. Your jump drive technology would benefit all. Hoarding it endangers unity. Alexander's jaw tightened. The last time we shared technology, our outposts along the outer rim were mysteriously raided by pirates equipped with weapons remarkably similar to those of the Zelkari Syndicate. His gaze shifted toward the Zelkari representative, whose multiple eyes blinked in feigned innocence. The Var Coalition's ambassador, a being of shifting hues named Morik, leaned forward. Your accusations are serious, Ambassador Graves. Unfounded hostility will not serve your people well. Alexander refused to be intimidated. Hostility was found in the debris of our destroyed vessels and the lives lost. We entered this council with hopes of mutual respect, not exploitation. The chamber buzzed with translated murmurs and hushed conversations. Alexander sensed the underlying currents, factions maneuvering for power, ancient rivalries flaring anew. Humanity had become a pawn in their political games, a tool to be used or discarded. Grand Chancellor Voresthal's mandibles clicked in a display of authority. Ambassador Graves, is it the position of Earth to refuse any further technological exchange? It is the position of Earth, Alexander replied, his voice unwavering, to no longer be coerced. We are willing to share, but not at the expense of our sovereignty or security. Zaltorn coiled with agitation. Then you defy the unity this council represents. Perhaps it is better for Earth to remain isolated, surrounded by the unknown dangers of the galaxy. Alexander's eyes hardened. If this is the unity you offer, then isolation is preferable. Earth will not be strong-armed into submission. The Grand Chancellor raised a clawed appendage, demanding silence. Let it be known that this council's purpose is peace and cooperation. We cannot afford division. Alexander sensed the Chancellor's desperation, a leader trying to hold together a fracturing alliance. But the Council's version of peace seemed little more than a demand for subservience. Peace cannot be built on intimidation, Alexander countered. Earth will not participate in a council that values our contributions only when it serves others' agendas. He stood taller, the diplomat's facade giving way to a soldier's resolve. If this is how the council operates, Earth refuses to be part of it. The declaration hung in the air, heavy and irreversible. The silence that followed was suffocating. Representatives exchanged uneasy glances, their plans unraveling. The Grand Chancellor's mandibles twitched, a rare display of discomfort. Ambassador Graves, reconsider your position. The consequences are Earth's to bear, Alexander interrupted, his tone final. Effective immediately, we are withdrawing all diplomatic envoys and ceasing communication with the Council. He turned and walked out, each step echoing through the stunned chamber. The massive doors closed behind him, leaving the Galactic Council in turmoil. Discussions erupted, languages overlapping as panic set in. Without humanity's stabilizing presence, old grudges resurfaced, alliances faltered, and threats loomed larger. In the corridors beyond, Alexander contacted Fleet Admiral Jonathan Hayes. "It's done," he said simply. Hayes' voice crackled over the communicator. "Understood. All ships are returning to Earth-controlled space. Fortifications are underway." Alexander nodded, knowing that Earth's isolation might be its salvation or its doom. But he also knew that freedom was a cost humanity was willing to bear. As the stars stretched out before him, the future remained uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, it was humanity's own. The Galactic Council, once a symbol of unity and progress, now teetered on the brink of collapse. And as they grappled with the fallout, humanity prepared for whatever came next, their resolve unbroken, their path self-determined. The council chamber was in chaos. The moment the door sealed behind the departing human ambassador, the once-ordered assembly dissolved into an uproar of clashing voices and heated accusations. Representatives from across the galaxy barked demands, hurled blame, and whispered amongst themselves in hushed, conspiratorial tones. The very foundation of the Galactic Council trembled beneath the weight of a single decision. Earth was gone. Grand Chancellor Voristhal loomed at the center of the storm, his multifaceted eyes scanning the chamber with barely concealed frustration. The meeting had spiraled far beyond his control, and the sudden withdrawal of humanity threatened to unravel the fragile alliances he had spent decades maintaining. His elongated fingers drummed against the polished stone of the central table. He needed order. He needed control. This council will restore decorum. His voice, amplified by the chamber's acoustic enhancers, cut through the cacophony like a blade. The echoes lingered, reverberating through the high-domed ceiling. One by one, the delegates settled, though tension still crackled in the air like a charged storm. Zaltorn of the Trellan Imperium coiled his serpentine frame tighter, his golden eyes flashing with barely concealed disdain. "The humans have proven themselves arrogant and short-sighted," he hissed. "Their withdrawal is no great loss. The Imperium has long warned of their dangerous individualism." Morik of the Var Coalition shifted his gelatinous mass, his skin flickering between uneasy shades of green and yellow. "You are blind if you cannot see the danger in their departure. Humans commanded a significant portion of the outer trade routes. Without them, piracy will surge." Across the table, the Zelkari delegate, a slender being draped in dark ceremonial robes, clicked his mandibles in amusement. "You speak of danger, yet you underestimate their value. The humans were a stabilizing force. Their absence will create opportunities." His words slithered into the ears of those willing to listen, and more than a few turned their heads in consideration. Voristhal clenched his mandibles. He recognized the undercurrents forming. The power vacuum left by humanity would not remain unfilled for long, and already the opportunists were maneuvering to exploit it. He knew the Zelkari well enough to understand that their talk of opportunity meant something far more insidious. "We cannot allow this divide to deepen," Voristhal declared. "We must send envoys. Open discussions with Earth once more. Convince them to reconsider." Zaltorn scoffed. "You mean grovel at their feet?" "I mean prevent a catastrophe," the Chancellor snapped. Earth's technological advancements placed them among the most formidable military powers in the known systems. Their departure shifts the balance. What happens when humanity decides that isolation is not enough? What happens when they decide we are their enemies? A hush fell over the chamber. For all their posturing, none of them could deny the truth in his words. Humanity's fleet was small compared to the oldest empires, but their strategic ingenuity, their relentless adaptability, had made them dangerous. In war, they did not fight for honor or tradition. They fought to win. Morik undulated slightly, considering. If war is the alternative, then we must prevent it at all costs. We should reopen negotiations before hostilities begin. "And what?" Zaltorn said, would you have us offer them? They have made it clear they will not submit to the Council's authority. Voristhal knew that was the core of the issue. Humanity had always been difficult to subjugate. The old powers had expected them to fold, to yield as so many other species had done upon their first contact with the greater galactic order. But humanity did not yield. They resisted, bargained, and fought. And now, they had walked away, taking their influence with them. A low, guttural voice rumbled from the far end of the chamber. If they do not wish to be part of the Council, then we should ensure they cannot threaten it. All eyes turned to General Korthos of the Dralin K Dominion, a war-hardened veteran clad in thick, obsidian armor. His race had long relied on brute force to maintain their position, and his meaning was unmistakable. If humanity would not submit through diplomacy, then force would be the next solution. Voristhal felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was a fulcrum upon which the fate of the Council now rested. I will not authorize aggression against humanity, he said firmly. Any move against them would escalate into open war, one we cannot afford. Zaltorn exhaled slowly, coils loosening slightly. Then what do you propose, Chancellors? Voristhal hesitated only a moment before answering. We send a delegation, not with demands, but with a genuine offer. One that ensures Earth's return without stripping them of their autonomy. Morik's colors darkened in thought. And if they refuse? Voristhal met his gaze evenly. Then we pray we have not made an enemy we cannot contain. The chamber fell into a heavy silence. The calculations had already begun behind every set of alien eyes. Some considered how to benefit from humanity's absence. Others weighed the cost of potential war. But all of them, in some way, felt the quiet shift in the balance of the stars. As the session adjourned, delegates dispersed in whispered conversations and hurried transmissions back to their homeworlds. The Galactic Council had survived countless crises before, but as Voristhal watched the departing figures, he could not shake the feeling that this time was different. For the first time in its long history, the Council faced an unknown that did not come from the dark fringes of space or the rise of a rogue warlord. This time, the unknown came from within, and it had a human face. The command center of Earth's Unified Defense Directorate was a fortress of steel and glass, perched above the Atlantic like a sentinel watching over the world. Inside, a war council convened, their faces lit by the glow of holographic displays, projecting the latest intelligence from the Galactic Council. The negotiations had collapsed. Humanity had walked away. And now, the consequences were unfolding. Fleet Admiral Jonathan Hayes stood at the center of the room, hands clasped behind his back, his sharp blue eyes scanning the shifting tactical projections. The air was thick with tension, but Hayes was unmoved. He had spent decades in deep space operations, facing threats from pirates, insurgents, and rogue planetary factions. This, however, was different. This was political warfare at its most dangerous. President Marcus Voss paced beside him, his expression carved from stone. The leader of Earth's unified government had been elected for his pragmatism, his ability to navigate crisis after crisis with unflinching resolve. That resolve was being tested now. There in disarray, Voss murmured, watching as reports streamed in from human-aligned intelligence networks embedded within the Galactic Council. Some want to bring us back. Others want to destroy us. Hayes nodded, his expression unreadable. And some will see our withdrawal as an opportunity to seize power. The Council was fragile before we arrived. Now, it's on the verge of collapse. The room fell silent. The implications were clear. Humanity had not just removed itself from the galactic order. It had destabilized it. That made Earth both a target and a prize. Alexander Graves entered the chamber without ceremony, his usual diplomatic composure giving way to something colder, harder. He had just returned from the negotiations, and though he had walked away with his head high, he carried the weight of what was to come. They weren't ready for us to leave, Graves said, taking his seat at the circular table. The moment I stepped out of that chamber, the infighting began. The The Trellans want retribution. The Zelkari see a power vacuum. The Var are afraid. His gaze flicked to Voss. They will come for us. Voss exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple. War. Graves shook his head. Not yet. But they will pressure us, economically, politically, maybe even through proxy conflicts. They'll want to break our independence before they consider direct confrontation. Hayes leaned forward. Then we don't give them the chance. We reinforce our borders, secure our trade routes, and ensure that if they try to push, they find an unmovable wall. Voss turned to General Elias Carter, head of Earth's Strategic Defense Initiative. Can we hold the hyperlanes? Carter, a man of few words but immense presence, answered without hesitation. We've already begun recalling fleet assets. Patrol routes are being tightened. Defense installations along the Sol Corridor and the Proxima Line are at full operational readiness. If they try to strong-arm us, they'll find a fully armed and operational battlefront. Voss nodded, satisfied. Good. But defense alone isn't enough. We need to control the narrative. His eyes locked onto Graves. You said some factions want us back. That's leverage. How do we use it? Graves folded his arms, his mind already working through the angles. We reach out quietly to the ones who see our value. We remind them that without us, they stand vulnerable to the more aggressive factions. If we can't be part of the council, we can at least influence those within it. Hayes smirked. Divide and conquer? Graves gave a thin smile. Diplomacy is war by other means, Admiral. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. The strategy was taking shape. Military preparedness, economic resilience, and political maneuvering. Humanity would not simply retreat into isolation. It would redefine its place in the galaxy on its own terms. Voss leaned over the table, his voice firm. I want full coordination between our military, intelligence, and economic sectors. We don't react to their moves. We stay ahead of them. If they expect us to weaken, we grow stronger. If they assume we'll be passive, we prove them wrong. Hayes gave a sharp nod. I'll have our carrier groups deploy along key trade routes. We'll make sure any accidental incursions by Council forces are met with overwhelming deterrence. Carter grunted in approval. I'll authorize preemptive security sweeps along the frontier worlds. If they try anything, we'll see it coming. Graves tapped a command into the terminal before him, sending encrypted orders to Earth's covert operatives still embedded within the Council's infrastructure. And I'll make sure we know their every move before they make it. The room settled into a focused silence. Each man understood his role. Each man knew what was at stake. Humanity had been dismissed, underestimated, even resented by the older civilizations. But now it was feared, and fear could be turned into power. Voss straightened, his voice final. We walked away on our terms. We stand alone on our terms. And if they try to take that from us... Hayes finished the thought, his tone like steel. Then they'll learn why humanity doesn't lose. The Galactic Council had never moved so quickly. In the span of a single cycle, emergency meetings were convened, alliances were tested, and old rivalries were set aside in the face of an undeniable crisis. Humanity's withdrawal had done more than fracture their political stability. It had exposed a fundamental weakness in the Council's ability to control its members, and that was something the ruling factions could not afford. Grand Chancellor Vorsthal sat in the center of the high chamber, his clawed fingers steepled before him, his normally composed expression darkened by the weight of the decision before him. Across the polished obsidian table, the key power players of the Council watched him in silence. Some, like Zaltorn of the Trellan Imperium, seated with barely concealed frustration. Others, like Morik of the Var Coalition, shifted in uneasy contemplation. The Zelkari envoy, Thaurin, coiled in quiet amusement, her insectoid mandibles clicking in a rhythm only she understood. We are at an impasse, Vorsthal said at last, his voice slow and deliberate. We cannot force them back. We cannot afford to let them remain apart. and we certainly cannot allow them to rise unchecked. Zaltorn slammed a scaled fist against the table. Then we must act. The Imperium will not tolerate this insult. We demand immediate military action. Strike before they can entrench themselves further. Morik's gelatinous form undulated in disapproval. A war with humanity would be catastrophic. We do not even know the full extent of their capabilities. If we attack, we may find ourselves on the losing side. Thaurin gave a low, amused chitter. But war is not the only path. There are subtler means of persuasion. Voristhal's gaze flicked toward her. Explain. The Zelkari envoy uncoiled slightly, her multifaceted eyes gleaming. Humanity believes it has secured its independence. It believes it can stand alone. But independence is a fragile thing. What if we remind them just how vulnerable they truly are? Morik rumbled with unease. You mean sabotage? Thaurin tilted her head in mock innocence. Sabotage is such an ugly word. No! I propose something more refined. A series of controlled disruptions. Economic pressures. Political destabilization. Perhaps a few strategic accidents in their trade routes. She let the implications hang in the air. We do not need to conquer them. We need only make them desperate enough to return willingly. Zaltorn scoffed. Cowardice. Morik, however, was considering. It is not without merit. The human economy, though strong, still relies on interstellar trade. Their frontier worlds are still vulnerable to external pressures. If we make existence outside the Council difficult, Voristhal exhaled slowly, his mandibles twitching in thought. A military confrontation would rally humanity against them, harden their resolve. But a quiet war, fought in shadows and through economic strangleholds, that was something different. That was something winnable. We will proceed carefully, he said at last. Disrupt their supply lines. Isolate their allies. Weaken their outer colonies. But nothing overt. If humanity detects our hand in this, we may find ourselves in the war we are trying to avoid. Zaltorn bristled but did not object. Thaurin simply smiled. Morik, still uncertain, gave a slow nod. And if this does not break them, Voristhal's eyes darkened. Then we will have no choice but to consider more direct action. Across the stars, the Council's desperate move was set into motion. The void between the stars had never felt so suffocating. Along the border of human-controlled space, the largest military assembly in modern history had converged. The Galactic Council's fleets hung in formation, their warships a tapestry of countless species, each one bristling with weapons primed and ready. Opposite them, humanity's forces stood in silent defiance. The tension was a living thing, stretching across the vacuum, waiting to snap. Fleet Admiral Jonathan Hayes stood on the bridge of the USF Dauntless, his expression a mask of cold calculation. Every display around him pulsed with incoming data. Enemy fleet movements, supply lines, last-minute intelligence reports. He could feel the weight of history pressing down on his shoulders. This was a moment. This was where humanity's fate would be decided. A chime signaled an incoming transmission. The main screen flickered to life, revealing Grand Chancellor Voristhal, seated in the ornate command chamber of the Council's flagship. The insectoid leader's gaze was unreadable, but his posture betrayed the pressure he was under. Admiral Hayes, Voristhal began, his voice measured. There is still time to avoid the bloodshed that looms before us. Hayes didn't blink. That depends entirely on you, Chancellor. Your forces have encroached upon sovereign human space. We will not stand down. Voristhal exhaled, his mandibles twitching in what might have been frustration. You misunderstand. We do not seek war, but your isolationism threatens the stability of the entire galactic order. There must be a resolution. Hayes' jaw tightened. Your version of resolution has included trade blockades, sabotage, and political coercion. And now, an armada at our borders. He took a step closer to the console, his voice like steel. Tell me, Chancellor, what part of that suggests peace? Behind Vorethal, Zaltorn of the Trellan Imperium loomed into view. The reptilian warlord sneered. Enough of this posturing. Humanity's arrogance has gone unchecked for too long. You will return to the Council's authority, or you will be crushed beneath the weight of those who truly command these stars. A murmur of dissent rose from another off-screen voice, likely Mork of the VAR Coalition. This is not the time for reckless threats. Hayes chuckled, but there was no humor in it. Reckless is marching a fleet to our doorstep and thinking we'd bow. He gestured toward one of his officers, who tapped the control panel. The view behind Hayes shifted, revealing the entirety of the human fleet. Lines of warships stretching beyond the horizon, their formations precise, disciplined. Humanity's forces may have been fewer in number, but every vessel was a testament to efficiency and lethality. You assume we are the ones who should be afraid, Hayes continued. That's your first mistake. A tense silence followed. Even across the distance of space, the shift was palpable. The Council had never fought a full-scale war against humanity. They had assumed Earth's withdrawal would leave it fractured, vulnerable. But now, confronted with the reality of an unyielding enemy, the certainty of their dominance wavered. Vorethal's multifaceted eyes flickered as he assessed the situation anew. War was no longer a tool of leverage. It was a gamble, and humanity, in all its defiance, was willing to call their bluff. Finally, the Chancellor exhaled slowly. Perhaps we have miscalculated. Hayes didn't move. He simply waited. Vorethal's gaze shifted toward the unseen delegates behind him. There was hushed discussion, arguments in languages that Hayes couldn't understand but could read in tone. The Council had come expecting submission or battle. They had not prepared for the stalemate staring them in the face. At last, the Chancellor spoke again. We will withdraw for now. But understand this, Admiral. Humanity cannot stand alone forever. Hayes inclined his head slightly. We'll take our chances. The transmission cut out. Moments later, sensors confirmed the movement of Council forces, their great fleet shifting course, breaking formation, retreating. The immediate crisis had passed. But Hayes knew this was far from over. As he turned to his officers, his voice was calm but firm. Maintain full readiness. This isn't the end, just the beginning. Across the bridge, the crew straightened, their eyes burning with the knowledge that humanity had faced the giants of the galaxy and had not bowed. The war had not come today, but the battle for the future had only just begun.